Morning. Welcome to OpenLine Online here Sunday morning, November 17th. And we thank you for holding on while we get everything together this morning here. And without further ado, we have a very interesting show. And of course, normally we get right into politics, but we have a special guest in studio, and I'll get to introduce our special guest. But let's introduce our panel first. First, I want to introduce the Sports Brothers. We have Jamie Harris from the Amsterdam News. Good morning, Brother Jamie.
Good morning, family. Good morning.
Morning, morning.
We have Brother Bobby Childs. Good morning, Bobby.
Good morning, everybody. And those of you who missed me last week, sorry I had some stuff to take care of, but you should be all getting on him because he ain't been here in a while. So.
Wow. Well, I got
Throw him under the bus.
Exactly.
I'm going to throw them both under the bus. I'm going to throw them both under the bus. Thank you out there, folks, because it was one of our largest viewerships last week. So we thank you for tuning in last week. And you know what we did? Since we had a smaller crew, we interact much more with the listeners out there. We call them the listeners who type in. We got a lot of them in, so we really, really appreciate that. We have a special guest, journalist who is returning back to the program, who was on our on-air program this morning, and it's journalist Lola Adesheye. Good morning, Sister Lola.
Good morning.
I have a problem with Lola Adesheye. That's wrong.
Adesheye.
Lola Adesheye.
That wasn't rolling. That was stumbling off your tongue, man.
Sometimes you get it right.
There you go.
That's okay though.
And our special guest this morning is R&B. I call you, brother, you're a legend, man.
I don't know about the legend part. Come on now. But go ahead, say
you know what? Before I even
Yeah,
say your
for
name,
real.
you have a career that spans over 32 years, and you look only 32.
We'll get your eyes checked, brother. Don't worry about that. They say that's the second thing to go. Your lady will let you know about the first.
There you go. 22 albums, my brother, and he is known as the Prince of Sophisticated Soul, and that is Brother Will Downing. Good morning,
Man,
Will.
thank you. I was looking for like the Lola. I was looking for the Will.
Will.
Boom, shake. Will. Lola.
Down.
There you go. I'll take it. You can introduce me on stage.
What we learned before we came on the air is you might have been giving Fatine the business on them courts in Brooklyn.
Hey, man, you never know. St. John's Park, baby.
St. John's Park. Flatbush, he out of Erasmus High School. I'm out of George Weston House, but we come from the Flatbush section of Brooklyn.
Absolutely.
And anyway, that's another reminiscence there, you know. So, Will, welcome to Open Line Online. We got a chance to talk with you briefly this morning. And you come on to talk about your newly released album. I believe it was released November 8th. Am I correct?
You are correct, sir.
And the name of that album?
Romantique Part 1. So there is a Part 2 coming.
Wow.
Yeah.
So let's talk about this album. Talk about this album, and because it's a special album.
It's a tribute album to baritone vocalists, which you don't hear anymore. I think you hear probably the most prominent one that you're hearing these days is Gregory Porter.
Yeah.
So he's maintaining the the genre, and I'm here to kind of like
1960 what?
Yeah, that's right. There you go. There you go, man. There you go. He's a singing brother.
Name some of those baritone singers that you looked up to.
Isaac Hayes, who's actually a person who used to be here.
Yeah.
Barry White, John Lucien, Johnny Hartman.
Oh,
yeah. See, he's having flashbacks. He's having flashbacks of probably what he did to.
Yeah. Well, I told Will before we were coming on that I'm glad to meet him. We met many years ago on a plane, but I used to listen to his music on a reel-to-reel when I was young and I was up to no good. and Love is Paradise always closed the deal. Always closed the deal.
Wow. Romantique. It's now.
I'm gonna put Sister Lola on the spot.
Oh, yeah?
Lola says she is a fan, so when she found out that Will Downing was here, she slept here last night. She did not want to oversleep. Tell Will why you love his music so much.
Well, as I told Will earlier, I used to date a guy who has a baritone voice. We're still friends, so that's okay.
Okay.
And he he loved Will Downing, so he put me on to the music. But just your voice is very soothing and beautiful. And yeah, it's true. We don't hear baritone voices anymore at all, really. Well, Gregory Porter, but apart from that, not at all. And I very much appreciate that. I sing too, so I appreciate all the ranges, and it's good to hear. And your music is sexy.
Thank you.
And Will, the baritone, as you say, the baritone voice, that's transcendent.
Absolutely.
And it spans generations. So why do you think that, in recent times, we've had less and less baritone singers?
Well, I think that music follows trends. So if there's one person that hits, then obviously there's someone that follows. And probably the person that hit has been a brother with a higher pitch voice. And so it's like you just following the trend. Like, hey, well, he did well, so we're going to start signing vocalists of that range. And then baritone vocalists, we just sort of got pushed aside. And not to mention that R&B has changed. The R&B that's being played today is not the R&B that I grew up to. Right. I mean, I grew up with Teddy and Luther and Isaac Hayes and Jeffrey Osborne. And, you don't hear that anymore, so.
I'm younger, H-Town, Silk.
Right.
You still had that tradition of that baton being passed on to the younger singers, and now it's just a very few R&B singers out there today.
Yeah, well, they call it R&B. I don't acknowledge it as R&B. That's what they call it. Hey, man, I was like, I don't, we used to be a little slicker talking than that, Right. Now brothers are just kind of like, hey, boom, I walk in the room, listen, this is what I want. I was like, yo, man, what happened to the romance? What happened to the
romance?
The baritone. Hold on. This is very interesting. I know. Brother Jeff LeVar, who I grew up with, who went into opera. He became an opera singer. He had the baritone voice. Did anyone say, "Man, this brother has a operatic voice"? Did anyone try to direct you in a different path?
No, nope. And I would have said
R&B, baby, R&B and jazz. That's my lane. I studied all of that stuff in school. But my heart is, I'm R&B, I'm jazz.
Yeah. Let me ask you this.
One of our viewers, Edward Latson, he said that Will Downing could sing the phone book.
He could sing the back of a cereal box.
No question.
Yeah.
Cool.
Oh, stop.
Will, when you started singing, what did you project and envision your career to be like?
Well, like most artists, I thought I was going to be, the biggest thing since sliced bread. I thought I was going to be able to walk down the street. I thought that, I was going to be the next Michael Jackson. And then when I turned 13 or 14, my voice changed. And it was like, oh, well, I ain't going to be that. That ain't going to happen.
Puberty changed all that.
ABC.
But did you ever think about doing, did you ever think about doing any radio or any voiceovers?
I've done all of that.
Okay.
I've done all of that, yeah. When I grew up, in Albany Projects in Brooklyn,
right,
like everybody could sing. Everybody could play ball. So, my parents were kind of like, hey, singing. You don't be no singer. Like, everybody can, all black folks can sing. All black folks can play ball. All black folks can dance. So I lucked out. I got lucky. Somewhere along the way, a teacher heard me and pushed me into it. And, I just sort of followed suit.
Now, one of the things, and when I got a chance to meet you, on The Quiet Storm with Lenny Green. And one of the things is, of course, I was familiar with your music. But I wasn't a big fan. Not that I didn't like you, I just wasn't a big fan.
Don't worry about my ego. I'm fine.
And I would say, who's this guy, Will Downing, on the album cover? And I'm not making fun of him, seriously, because I'm going to tie this in. And he has no shoes on, and I would hear one of our other DJs, Shayla, she would make a big thing of it. But then when I first met you, my brother, the impression that you, right now it shows, man. You just have this warm personality, and then when I went back and listened to some of the music that doesn't get repeated airplay, I was like, man, your music is like your personality, my brother.
Man, thank you, bro.
But what caused the whole image of that, the album no shoes. What was that about?
We shot that album cover in the desert in L.A. And, ain't nobody wearing no meslins out in the desert. So it was like, man, take your shoes off. So I took my shoes off, and Shayla killed me. She's like, look like you've been kicking flour. Did you walk across the desert when you? I'm like, come on, baby. And some people thought it was sexy, but
Right. But before we get to some of the listeners out there, let's talk about the album, and then we'll see if we can get a couple of the cuts on there. Let's talk about some of the songs on there and the first release single, which is Deja Vu.
Deja Vu, yeah, the song originally done by Dionne Warwick. And I'm sure folks out there trying to figure out how I tied in a baritone vocalist project with Deja Vu, originally done by a woman. Isaac Hayes wrote the song, and there's another version with Isaac Hayes and Dionne Warwick doing it together, which people have rarely heard. So I decided to bring it back, and I did it with my very good friend, Miss Avery Sunshine. And, we try to reenact this classic song the best that we can. So,
Somebody just hit me in the back of my head, and it was Bob Slade. And Bob Slade said, you know I knew that, brother, for that. I had to give him credit.
Yes,
but
sir.
let's go to the control room, and let's see if we can play a little bit of this Deja Vu for our audience out there.
This is insane. All you did was say hello, speak my name, feeling your love.
So what stuff do you say?
Like a love I used to know long ago.
How can it be? You're a different space and time. Come to me. Feel like I'm home in a place I used to know long ago. Deja vu. Could you be the dream that I once knew? Is it you?
Deja vu.
Oh.
Oh my
You know,
goodness.
it's of course, it sounds good. We're not telling you that just to tell you that. It's worth getting up.
Man,
there
thank
this morning.
Absolutely.
Talk about a couple more songs on the album, and then we are trying to give our listening audience a little taste of a few more songs on the.
I did the Lou Rawls classic, You'll Never Find, but I did it in a stepper's way. When I was a kid, my father used to put me in his Buick. Electric 225.
Deuce in the quarter. Deuce in the quarter, baby. You got to be in.
Brother, he had 3 or 4 8-tracks, and Lou Rawls, that one was one of them. So I'd hear that song over and over and over and over again. And he said, listen, you'll know you can sing when you're able to kind of remake this song and make it your own. And so I decided to remake it. He's no longer with us, but I'm sure he's listening from heaven.
Hey, listen, my mom, she wasn't into, the corporal punishment, but I almost got it one day because I put an iron on her Lou Rawls album. I'll never forget that. And it was like I was almost out the house, brother.
Wait a minute.
And listen, I was about 7 years old. It was a mistake. I could be forgiven.
Mom,
but
this song is hot.
listen, but to this day, she hasn't forgiven me for that.
Mama was not impressed.
I want to put my stamp of appeal on it.
It was an accident, man.
This joint is hot.
The same way I want to write on my dungaree jacket with Clorox. You know how we used to fade out back in the day?
Right.
And it got on my wife's new reupholstered couch. Oh, turned it white.
Fumble.
I know. Other songs on there.
My One and Only Love, Johnny Hartman and John Coltrane. Now, I know folks can probably scratching their heads, but this is a classic song, and when you hear it, it's going to blow your mind. I got to do it with live strings and the whole nine, and we actually spent some money. We spent some real money to make this one, so it's a classic song. What else did I do on this album? I did a remake of one of my old songs, a song called If She Knew. It's about a song about a guy who's infatuated with this woman that he works with, but he doesn't have the cojones to tell her. So it's how he goes through the day, you know, kind of what?
I'm just picturing.
I don't want to say it.
Yeah. This guy sitting at his desk or whatever. This woman
It's
walking
so
by.
ironic because my cousin, you know, that introduced me to Philadelphia International, he would show me how on the back of the album of Philadelphia International there used to be these sayings, and my cousin said, "You talk about the romantic time of that when that music was out." He said, "If a brother didn't have that rap."
Right.
All he had to do is put that album on and say, "Hey, baby, just listen. You know what? I want to say something, but
that's the way I
just listen
feel.
to this here."
Right.
And boy, that the album says it all.
Hey
You
man,
understand?
and to this day, that
this
still
day.
works. Try it. Put on Romantic. See what. Where's my camera?
Man.
Put on Romantic. See what happens.
Man, let me tell
Change
you,
your life.
brother, we had a saying. I ain't gonna go too far, but they said if you put Luther or Teddy on, and
Listen.
if nothing happens, you might as well get your coat and go ahead out.
Yeah.
If you put them on, ain't nothing happening. You might as well go ahead and get your coat.
Interested at all.
Put on and just look at it. Just like,
Right.
well, no. All right. Well, you know. Next.
You know, I'm gonna give it to our control room because we have a few of your songs in. I'll let them go down the list on our next song to play, and then let you go ahead and let our listening audience know what that song is, unless they, of course, hear it and know it themselves. Next song.
You pick one.
You
Doesn't
pick
matter,
it.
brother.
You pick it,
pick
Tazo.
You
Anyone
can't
you
go
want,
wrong.
Tazo.
You can't go wrong with mine. Anything you pick.
That's right.
It's all fun.
Random selection,
Random
Tazo.
selection.
By the way, DB4A says to your song about If She Knew, he said he can relate to that. We can
Oh,
all
okay.
relate.
Absolutely. I think everyone's been through that one before.
We work in the control team. They don't normally do this part,
Yeah,
Hey, that's
and they
all
gotta
right.
remember to hit the remote on the.
He's on it. Jump on it, doggone it. Here he goes.
See, back in the day, you gotta know how to DJ because you had to talk to that.
You'll never find, as long as you live, someone who loves you tender like I do. Listen, you'll never find, no matter where you search, someone who cares about you the way I do. Oh, I'm not bragging on myself, baby, but I'm the one who loves you, and there's no one else. No one else. You'll never find. It'll take the end of all time. Someone who understands you the way I do, baby. You'll never find.
Play the whole album.
The very thought of you makes my heart sing like an April breeze on the wings of spring. And you appear in all your splendor, my one and only love. The shadows fall and spread their mystic charms in the hush of night while you're in my arms. I feel your lips so warm and tender. My one and only touch of your hand is like heaven. Try to hide my feelings, they always seem to show. Then you try to say you're leaving me, and I always have to say no. Tell me why is it so that I never can say goodbye? I never can say goodbye. Every time I think I've had enough and start. She'll be coming in real soon. So every day I come in early just to wait for her. She'll sit at her desk, pull back her hair, then spray perfume. As it fills the room, I close my eyes and I start to fantasize. 'Cause if she knew that I care for her, if she knew I'd be there for her and always I love you. Oh, I wonder what she'd do. I wonder what she'd do if she knew. Five after 1, and usually she'd be back from lunch, and I start to think of all these crazy things. Oh, where could she be? Is there someone else? Someone who's living now?
Audition failed.
Yeah, I'll cover 'em.
Okay, so we're back here. We were moving our mouth, you know, we were like Muppets in here. We were moving our mouth, but nothing was coming out. But before Bobby gets to the comments here, as I was bringing to Brother Will, is that he has a concert coming up this Saturday in Brooklyn. And what theater is that?
I'll be the King's Theater on Saturday, along with Gladys Knight. So it's going to be a great night of music right on Flatbush Avenue. For those who know Brooklyn, if you don't know Brooklyn, Flatbush Avenue. Just come on out, King's Theater. Be on time. Be there at 7. 7. 7. Not 7.
7.
Be there at 7 o'clock.
7 o'clock.
Yes, and be on time.
Let me ask you, Will, and I know this might be a last-minute addition, but since Lola was singing, the listeners didn't get a chance to hear Lola sing. Do you think maybe she could come up there?
And Lola can come up there.
Yeah, maybe she could at least one country.
I'll be there.
We were playing Never Can Say
Lola
Goodbye.
was
She was
singing,
over there.
man.
Never can say goodbye. I was like, wait a minute.
Well, listen,
I'll be there.
You've been known to
At 6:45.
Lola say that she's such a
She'll be there on
fan.
time.
Lola says that she's such a fan.
For the
I
sound
already
check.
arranged for you to get a pair of tickets
Oh,
already.
Come on.
Well, Will, you do have a history with duets. You know, Avery Sunshine on this one. You did one with Rochelle Farrell out there. So listen,
next.
there you go.
Hey,
Right.
you never know.
You're next.
Hey.
You're next.
You never know.
Bobby,
if she lowered her
hit some of those
standards enough to
comments.
say
Yeah,
what
I know,
So
I mean,
you have
to
Tom
think about it.
Barzay. The album I love best by Will Downing is Dream Fulfilled. April, oh wow, I should drive up from Delaware just for that show.
Yes.
You have this is a nice album cover, Miss Lee Williams. There's one hater in there, Anthony Long. It sounds all right.
That's all right. That's all right.
Hater.
Edward Latson says, "Put that music back on." Michael Dwyer says he's you're one of his favorite singers, and he's going to go buy the CD. Cheryl J64 can't wait to buy the CD for my car. So just people are just very appreciative of you joining us this Sunday morning.
Man, it's my pleasure.
And sharing your voice and go out there and support the brother. We shine a light on him, and I'm glad many of you have just well received him this
I'd
morning.
like to ask a question. My question is, having been in the business for 32 years, is there any time when your love for music and singing has waned, or how have do you still have the same passion for it as you did from early?
I still have the same passion. See, I'm not good looking and smart like you, so I don't have many options. This it.
Right, this is it.
So no, I still love the music. I still love making it. Obviously, this is my 22nd album, my 32nd year recording. So I ain't gonna stop till the casket drop.
Brother, you have touched countless lives. You have a special gift, and you've shared that gift with the world.
He made some babies.
And you continue to do that. Oh, a lot of babies, man.
Baby,
A lot of babies.
Don't
Listen.
Don't kill the messenger.
Bobby can't share some of those stories on air because it'll be too.
Come on, let it go.
That was a long time ago. Listen, and as I was saying off the air, not many people may recognize it, but you're married to a singer as well. And those of you old heads out there, Unlimited Touch, Audrey Wheeler, Searching to Find the Love. That's
my
your
wife.
wife out there.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
music is in the family there.
Absolutely.
That was
Hey.
my ex-girlfriend in Farmingdale. That was our song back in
Uh-oh,
1981.
I thought you were going to say that was your ex.
Exactly.
Okay.
So they had a rivalry on the court and off the court.
Wait a minute. Close. I know, you two grew up in the same neighborhood.
I didn't know that you did a radio show, The Wind Down. Talk a little bit about that.
Yeah. I've been doing it for the last since 2007. It's a weekly show, and what I do is I play the best of what's out here today. I play album cuts from these artists as well.
Beautiful.
We have a segment where we pay tribute to a classic artist. We have interpretations, one song by two artists. So it's a weekly show. It's on SoundCloud. Look up, and don't laugh when I say this, WD Chocolate. I just said don't laugh. Did they not? I said
Awesome.
don't laugh. I prefaced it before. I said don't laugh.
With WD chocolate wait. How does this chocolate and flour go together?
It sounds like a porno star, right?
It
WD
does
chocolate.
actually.
Yeah.
Yeah. He's like, that's the Pornhub. That's the Pornhub version.
How can people get your album?
Oh, you can go on iTunes. You can go on Amazon. You can follow me at willdowning.com. I'm Will Downing 3 on Twitter. I'm Will Downing 3 on Instagram. I'm Will Downing Singer on Facebook. Punch my name up. If a not so good looking bald-headed black man pops up, it's probably me. Just follow me and support.
But you are Will Downing, brother.
Thank you very much, sir. Thank
The
you.
one
thank you,
and
thank you,
only.
thank
And
you.
by the way, not Freddie Jackson, because I know people have probably confused you over time thinking, was that Freddie or is that Will? No, you are Will Downing.
I am Will. I am not Freddie Fred. That was my man, but nope. I ain't Freddie Fred. No disrespect. I am Will Downing.
Yes. So Gladys Knight, Saturday at the King's Theater in
Correct.
Brooklyn. Get there at 7.
Please.
7. Not
Please.
7.
Please, 7. I don't want you walking in. He didn't sing my song. I said, sure I did. When we started the show on time.
So
7:01.
Who's on first? You?
Come on now. She's a legend. She's a legend, superstar.
Gotcha.
Yeah,
I thought she might say, this is your home.
I'm
so-
No, and by the
no.
way, I recently seen Gladys perform down in D.C. and she's just outstanding.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, she's phenomenal.
She's still, well in her 70s, and
Yeah.
she can still sing it and she can still bring it
please.
out there. There was one thing I did see that was a little head scratcher. So her backup singers, they all sat down. I've never seen backup singers sit down before.
Yeah.
It's like, is that a new thing or is that like a Gladys thing?
Well, she had a residency in Vegas, so that was her. That was her show in Vegas. Like sit down, chill. All the concentration is on her.
Oh, got it.
So yeah, it's a yeah.
I thought you were going to say they got tired after Vegas. Okay, we're done now.
What's funny is they're sitting there.
I got sand in my throat. I gotta sit down.
What's funny is they're just sitting there, snapping their fingers. I'm like, I think I could do that. I can go back and sing just sitting down.
When he mentioned background singing, is one of the people that come to mind because we work. And I got a chance to work with a brother for 25 straight years. Was Brother Mtume, and his lead singer, on Juicy,
Tawatha,
Fruit was Tawatha.
Right.
Is this a small network that you stay in touch with each other? The
Absolutely.
R&B group out there.
Absolutely. I mean, the music world itself is very small, but singers, real singers in general, yeah. I mean, we all know each other fairly well. I know Tawatha and all the amazing vocalists that came up. She came up with Luther. Luther, I knew. So I'm saying it's a circle.
Listen to her stories. If you've heard them,
I'm sure.
My goodness, stories,
I'm
man.
sure.
And the excellence that Luther, of his growing up and how it made her a better singer. And Mtume, the stories that he told, because when Mtume was, when I use the word was, in the sense of when he was out there, he started with Miles Davis, he coming from the jazz.
Right.
Then he wrote for Stephanie Mills, Phyllis Hyman, and then he wrote for himself.
Right.
So I would learn so much through him. But Will, I want to thank you for getting up early this morning, my brother.
Man, I didn't realize it was another 9 a.m. I mean, thank you.
And I want to say, brother, thank you for keeping the genre and the era alive. Music spans time, and so for a lot of the younger viewers and listeners and lovers of music, I mean, this is truly classic music, and it's music that represents a time and a period where we were still in the struggle, and we were in the music industry struggling to gain independence and control of your music and control of, your creative, direction. And so, brother, you have been one of those pioneers in a sense, and you continue to move the music forward and keep it in the consciousness of people.
Man,
it's true.
That's
it's
true,
true,
baby.
I appreciate that, man.
That's true.
Thank you.
That's
really
true. What
appreciate
album besides your music? What album or artist is your go-to artist before you leave? Who is your go-to artist?
I mean, I got several. Donny Hathaway, Stevie, obviously. Luther, huge influence on me. So, I mean, that's
But
that's
is there
my
one
era.
album that you just it never gets old to you?
Man, all of Al Jarreau this time. Al Jarreau, the This Time album, that changed my whole life. I was in high school, and that changed. I heard that album.
Out there that would
I
break
was
that
like,
ice.
that's it. Yeah.
Bring back memories.
There you go. You saw it. You saw the whites in my eyes, rolling the back of my head. Wow.
Well, Will, again, we thank you for coming up and sharing some time with us and our listening audience out there. This was definitely a treat. Time to time, we'll speak with some music artists. This one, definitely had us smiling from beginning, to end. So thank you, my brother.
Thank you, brother. Thank
Will
you.
Downing, folks, everybody.
Let's hear it for me.
So we don't take a break. We just gonna let Will go ahead and make.
They kicked me out. Just go and say it. Just say good time.
What song? What are the songs?
Get out of here. It's a real pressure meeting you. I mean, pleasure meeting you.
Now back to politics.
Thanks, guys.
I gotta give Benny a call.
Oh, no.
This is insane. All you did was say hello, speak my name, feeling your love like a love I used to know long ago.
How can it be? You're a different space and time. Come to me. Feel like I'm home in a place I used to know long ago.
Could you be the dream that might come true, shining through?
I keep remembering me.
I keep remembering you.
Deja vu.
This is divine, and I've been waiting all my life, feeling time, looking for you. Nights were more than you could know, so long ago.
Come to me now. We don't have to dream of love. We know how.
All right, folks, welcome back.
Still
to
having fun.
Yeah, that's right. Welcome back to OpenLine Online. And, this is, one of the things is about the show is that after the passing of Bob Slade, one of the things is that we want to make sure that we continue to bring folks excellence. But there's a lot more coming down the road, more interviews of folks coming on in, and different folks, coming in. Sometimes we bring people a blast from the past, but we're going to have some artists, sports people. You brothers are out there, and we can get some of these sports people up in the morning, to come on in. It really, really will work. But now, yes, we are going to turn the page to some of the news stories out there. And, of course, I could go in a different direction, but I don't want folks to jump all over me, so I will start with the impeachment. I really want to start with Colin Kaepernick, but I'll save that one for a little later because we really want to dive into that because Colin Kaepernick, Lola, he goes out with Nessa, who's the DJ on the Hot 97.
Right, yes. Okay, yeah.
So Colin Kaepernick, time to time, if you're here during the weekdays, he's in the hallway.
Yeah.
And he's a down brother, a righteous brother, But this week we saw the impeachment hearings pick up, the inquiry here pick up this week. And I'm going to, since Bobby wasn't here last week, I'm going to let Bobby kick it off and talk about what took place this week.
Well, listen, let me start off. Anthony Long, no offense out there. I was just joking. I know you're not a hater. You're a longtime supporter here, so no offense, my brother. So the impeachment this week. So, again, the panel investigations have continued. We had a chance, even as of yesterday on Saturday, one of the Office of Management and Budgets, he came out to talk. He defied what the restrictions the White House had been put on, and he said, no, he wants to testify. And what he did basically was just validate what I think many of us who've been following it know, which is Sunderland, who paid $1 million to the Trump campaign, and he ended up getting an ambassadorship for the EU, somehow got involved in the Ukraine. Last time I checked geography, they're not the same. And so, there were a lot of questions in the State Department as well as the Office of Management and Budgets around who is this guy?
Yeah.
And prior to that, we had the former Ukraine ambassador, Maria Yovanovitch, thank you, who testified. And during her testimony, the President of the United States tweeted out that came across as harassment and threatening, referencing her failure at every station she was in, including Mogadishu and Somalia, and it was just insane.
Bobby, let's use a term that is a legal term and criminal, which is witness intimidation.
Intimidation, yeah.
Yeah.
It was witness intimidation.
In real time. In real time. And then the irony, and we'll get to this later on, the same time, Roger Stone, his Trump associate, gets convicted, gets found guilty of 7 counts, including witness tampering and harassment.
Correct.
Earlier in the week, it started off with Bill Taylor and George Kent, who testified and just basically put color on the transcripts that they had out there and just pointed out how Giuliani was so deeply enmeshed in this. They couldn't understand. It was so unconventional. And then the Republicans, just again, we call it politics, as Bob used to call it. They try some of their tricks out there because they have not really gone after the content of what is being said, but they try to attack the format and the process. And we had one issue here where they all sides agreed to what the protocols would be in terms of how the hearings would be done. 45 minutes, and then each member gets 5 minutes. Well, one of the Republicans, she objected to, well, Devin Nunes tried to give her his 45 minutes, which was not allowed. And then she made a stink about it, and the Republicans made a stink about it, saying how Adam Schiff was trying to shut down a woman.
That's Congresswoman Stefanik from New York.
Stefanik,
yes.
yeah, from New York,
upstate New York.
And she, which she basically lied, right? She knew what the rules were, and they tried to make it seem as though that he disrespected her, when actually they disrespected the rule of law, which, by the way, summarizes this whole thing, in my opinion, how they are not respecting the rule of law.
And she was, in terms of how people viewed her, so offensive that her opponent, who's running against her in the next congressional election, her fundraising skyrocketed just within the matter of the last couple of days after people saw what was really a disgraceful and very disrespectful display by her, and interjecting and, again, totally dismissing and ignoring the rules of the House and the hearings.
Well, I think an interesting thing's going to happen is, so after Maria Yovanovitch's testimony, you know, the way that some of the Republicans talked about her is in such glowing terms. And I think what's going to happen is that as more people start to come out and give evidence, because there are lots of people who've been working who are so fed up and have seen a lot of stuff, and as more start to come out, others will start to come out invariably. And then where you have Republicans who are like, hold on a second, yes, on one hand, we could say this is a partisan thing, but then when we have, you know, foreign service officers who've been doing this for 33 years, are we actually going to be seen to be throwing them under the bus as well? I think there are some Republicans that won't do that. So I think that will cause a division, or may cause a division amongst Republicans, as they start to see more people going, well, are we really going to do this now?
Right.
Like, there's one thing to do theatrics, but are we actually going to stand in front of the country and throw our people under the bus?
So just to that, do you think they will do something, or will they do nothing and stay silent around it? So when they see it, they will say, well, I'm not going to be a part of that, so I'm not going to say anything, but I'm not going to go far enough to actually stop them from doing this.
Well, it's hard to say, but all it takes, I think, is one Republican to stand up and say something. Because they're weak, actually. The truth is they're weak, and they're so afraid of not towing the party line. If one person breaks ranks, others will follow. But it's likely that they could just be silent and not say anything.
Yeah, because we just see so many of them who are actually retiring, which is a form of, you know,
A sort of silent protest, isn't it?
silent protest. But really, what impact is having, because people are saying, okay, they retired, and they're not making a connection to maybe their retirement is a silent protest.
Or a safe way for them to distance themselves from Donald Trump and this administration, knowing that they have a career beyond Congress and looking maybe to run one day for higher office or move into the private sector. And remember, those who are supporting him are thinking about their careers beyond Congress, because they know they want these lobbying jobs, and those who have this share the same ideology as Trump and those in his administration, those are the same people who may determine whether or not you'll get one of these high-paying lobbying jobs. And so I do think so. And let me just say this, Lola.
You're right.
I thought that one of the defining moments of Yovanovitch's testimony, that this was brilliant on the part of the Democrats, when Val Demings spoke about how this impacted her family. And I thought this had a very visceral effect, because I think, particularly women, it was moving for me. But I think when women see this, independent women, women who are objective, were watching this, and I think that's why they had Val Demings, another woman, speak to her about that. Women can empathize, and how this could impact the family, how this impacts your lives, how this has an impact on your children.
For sure.
You have to uproot your life. And so this goes beyond Yovanovitch. Again, this impacted her family. And I think that there was an emotional connection with so many Americans who were watching this, that they could experience that.
Yeah.
Maybe they've had, issues at their job, and maybe they've been unfairly targeted and how it impacted them. So I thought that was very brilliant, and I think that'll have a lasting effect.
Well, the other thing, the other thing was, what really, really hit her emotionally is the day she was notified that she was being relieved of her duty, she was at a memorial service in Ukraine.
For a woman who'd been killed.
For a woman who had been killed.
Yeah.
And so to get a phone call in the middle of it and says, your life is in danger, you need to leave, that is just very, very
on the
chilling.
next plane.
On the
Yeah.
next plane. On the next plane, which is very chilling.
And another thing is that, and she made a good point, which was, okay, the president can get rid of ambassadors at any time for no cause. The fact that they did a smear campaign in a place that has this new president in Ukraine has just implemented a law that basically says, if you are a member of government, you can't just do what you want. So you're in a place that's essentially lawless. And your own president is conducting a smear campaign against you in a place where if something happens to you, there's no guarantee that he's going to step in because he's part of it. And you're a woman and you have open enemies. I mean, that is it's disgusting.
But Trump always talked about Hillary Clinton and how she handled Benghazi and the folks down there. One of the things that is so many things that are troubling in this whole scenario with President Trump. But I'm trying to understand, is this still the remnants of President Obama, a black man becoming president, and these Republicans trying to hold on to their last hooray? Because if you look going forward, as you talk about the future, you got a lot of Republicans that are not returning to office. And a lot of people that will go to the polls. And right now, I don't know how it's going to be for Republicans going forward for the future.
Well, listen, this, they always take their shots at the Obama administration, but let's be clear, they're just throwing whatever they can at the wall to see what sticks. This is about what we all know what Trump did was to do something that is self-serving, to go out there and try to legitimize his election by not blaming Russia and for getting smear campaign against Joe Biden. Yep. That is what is at the core of this. This originated from Trump, and it is being supported by his party. And they are throwing all kind of stuff on there. Even during the testimony, they're talking about, the money was received, and it was more money in aid than what the previous administration did. And so what's that have to do with the fact that he's abused his power? And so they're trying to do everything in their power to try to distract, which is their game plan, and to point fingers out there. And the other thing, you talked about Benghazi. One of the things about Benghazi, right? Remember, that came and went. They had so many hearings for multiple years, and it ended with the same way it started, which was like there was no fault.
The most expensive investigation in congressional history.
But in those cases, here's a couple of things. Hillary Clinton testified. She went there. Susan Rice testified, right? So now we have Mike Pompeo not testifying. We have John Bolton not testifying.
Mulvaney.
We have Mulvaney not testifying. And then there was Welsh, I forget which district he is, but he made a comment when Jim Jordan went on a riff and talked about we should really hear the person who started all of this, meaning the whistleblower, should be coming here to talk. And then Representative Welch said, well, yeah, I agree. We should have the person who started. Donald Trump is welcome to come in anytime.
Welch is serving Massachusetts.
And
go back to your question, Fatina. You're absolutely right. Donald Trump is a tool.
But for a lot of reasons, right? A tool, yeah. You
want to use that euphemism? Donald Trump is a tool to move forward the agenda of so many of these conservative and, dare I say, right-wing Republicans, whether it's immigration, whether it's the Supreme Court, whether it's the suppressing again and the trying to reverse the inevitable demographic shift that's taking place in this country. And also they're self-serving because they know so many of their constituents, like Stefanik, they support him. So she's looking out, as so many others are, for their own self-interest, because they know a large segment of the constituency are his supporters, and that could mean the difference between them getting reelected or voting out. So they're serving their own self-interest, as he is, as Bobby pointed out, serving his.
Right.
And so I do want to make a point here. Yeah, sorry. There are two things. There's one in the short term, people wanting to be re-elected, right, and hold on to their conservative values. In the bigger picture, though, Russia has a desire to be the global superpower. And if you look at all this Ukraine stuff, this is all connected to Putin. And this all serves Putin's interests, every single part of it. And so people are looking like Mueller reports over here, impeachment, those are connected. Those are 100% connected. And Trump is so stupid that he can't see, and actually Republicans seem not to be able to see either, that they want to use America as the fall guy for Trump's larger plan. And everything, Brexit, the whole
Brexit,
lot
right?
is all connected with Putin.
Absolutely. And remember, from a geopolitical perspective, Ukraine is the largest landmass in Europe.
Yes.
So to gain control of that gives you even greater strategic advantage if you're Russia. And so, as you very astutely pointed out, Lola, there's so many reasons why. You mentioned Brexit, why Russia, and they are, and Trump is complicit. Listen, we know that the intellect clearly is limited in terms of knowing. No. Listen, geopolitics.
Sure.
But he understands how to serve his interests, and at the same time, we know that Russia is using him, and he's well aware of that.
Yeah. Now there were transcripts released yesterday in the impeachment inquiry, which show Ambassador Gordon Sondland playing a central role in President Donald Trump's effort to push Ukraine to conduct political investigation as a condition for receiving needed military aid. It goes on to say that the fresh details come from hundreds of pages of testimony released by the House investigators from Tim Morrison, a former top official at the National Security Council. Testimony from Jennifer Williams, a special advisor to Vice President Mike Pence, also raises new questions about how much he knew about the alleged trade-off that's central to this whole impeachment. So that just came out yesterday. Now,
Pence.
Coming forward this weekend, I just want to lay out what's going to happen this weekend.
How much Pence knew?
How much Pence knew? Yes, that was released yesterday. We got to find out how much.
Yeah. So you talked about the transcripts being released, right? And, he's gone on, 45 has gone on to talk about how the transcripts were perfect and everything, right? And remember, their argument was he was concerned about corruption.
Yeah.
Well, in the released and the doctored ones, not once did he use the word corruption.
No.
When you read through those, he doesn't refer to corruption at all. But yet, that's their argument. That was a perfect call, and this is what he was concerned about. So they can't even lie effectively. No. And what we've seen is when they lie, all they do is double down, and they bully people.
And I don't know, I don't watch Fox that much, but just to go back to when a lot of folks were saying that it was lukewarm when the impeachment hearings came on television Wednesday. And what does Trump do Friday? He sends out a tweet. And then all of a sudden, more people became interested in watching this.
Right.
But they saw him bully Yovanovitch when she was testifying there.
He's some people say he's a genius, but he's very stupid.
Some people, I only hear himself calling himself a genius.
People have said to me they think Trump is a genius because he's so dumb that they can't believe that he can be that stupid, so he must be brilliant, and they just are trying to haven't quite figured it out.
We have said on this show, Lola, many times that we believe he's incredibly incompetent, and people confuse that with smart.
He is so... he has no strategic thinking whatsoever. He is extremely emotional, reactive, and what he doesn't understand. See, he's been doing this his whole life, right? But he's been doing it in a limited sphere, and he just couldn't imagine, because I don't think he has a great imagination, what it'd be like to do this in front of the whole world. So when you do shoot from the hip and you send something out, it's not just you and your buddies that see it. Everybody sees it.
He has no impulse control. And, it goes back, again, to the Exonerated 5 when he took out a full-page ad calling for the death penalty. Right. I mean, he's very impulsive, and some people may look at it as strategic. No, as you said, it's just
isn't
he's shooting from the hip. He has no impulse control.
None.
And to do what he did Friday, as Bobby pointed out, to tweet in real time, and to essentially carry out what is witness intimidation.
That's right.
That is going to be that is very damning. And I do think that's going to be very damaging for him.
And it's not the first time he's done that.
Adam Schiff says that he can hold, he can bring charges against him on that.
For sure.
That's another article.
You're being
article on
investigated for potential impeachment, and you're doing that. Like,
Bobby, I don't know if you have
in front of the whole world.
I want to get ready to move on, but Bobby, I'll let you search to see if there's a couple of comments. But I just want to just read what's coming this week, dealing with the impeachment hearings. There's 8 additional witness tests going to be present this week. On Tuesday morning, Jennifer Williams, Vice President Mike Pence, Special Advisor for Europe and Russia, will testify alongside Lieutenant Colonel Alexander Vidman of the National Security Council. Later that day, former U.S. envoy to Ukraine, Kurt Volker, and Timothy Morrison, the NSC's Russia expert, will appear before the Intelligence Committee, which has led the impeachment inquiry. Then, Gordon Sondland, everybody's waiting for him to testify in public. That's the U.S. ambassador to the EU, the European Union, who amended his closed-door testimony to lawmakers last week, will appear on the morning of Wednesday, November 20th. He's followed by Laura Cooper, a senior Defense Department official, and David Hale, a top State Department official, and that's Wednesday afternoon. Then Fiona Hill, the NSC's former Russia expert under former National Security Advisor John Bolton, is scheduled to appear on Capitol Hill the morning of Thursday, November 21st. Bobby?
Yep. So we got a couple of ones. Nat Turner. Laura Ingraham, she's on Fox, said bribery is no impeachable offense.
yeah,
Laughing
it's in
my
the
ass off.
Constitution.
You can't make this stuff up.
It's in the
That actual
Constitution.
word.
Yes.
It's in the
Yeah.
Constitution.
Michael Dwyer, it's ingrained behavior. They see bribery as normal as breathing.
Well, he's right, because remember, Mulvaney said, who now is the chief of staff, he said, hey, quid pro quo, that's normal.
Right, right.
That's something that is done all the
Right.
time, which it's not.
Right.
So he's absolutely right. Great
Right.
comment. Absolutely correct.
DB4A, what else can his supporters say? They have to say that sky is green when it is clearly blue. It's called alternate facts.
Now, Bobby, you mentioned this.
And there's a lot of great praise, by the way, for Lola.
Yes.
So you got to come back. You gotta come
Yeah.
back.
I was gonna save that
You
to
gotta
the
come back.
end.
You got to come back.
Yes, she will be invited back there. So, but
I'll be back.
Bobby always jumping the gun here. But anyway,
It's called
wow.
being proactive.
I was gonna save that to the last, but
Seize in the moment.
here we go. Bobby mentioned in his opening on the impeachment about the Trump ally Roger Stone being found guilty on all 7 counts in a federal trial. Republican operative Roger Stone found guilty on all 7 counts against him, including witness tampering and making false statements. Here, another one bites the dust.
Yeah, I think there's been like 8 or 9.
Yeah, it's a
of
whole
his,
bunch of
right,
them.
Like Manafort and
I think Stone makes
Flynn.
Stone makes 6.
Six.
Stone makes 6.
Man,
Okay.
Yes, that'd have been
well,
convicted.
no, actually, no. So 6,
That'd
right?
have been
but-
convicted.
Right, but there's some others who've actually been in jail and got out. Stephanopoulos and the other, I forget the other guy's name who
Not Stephanopoulos,
What's happened to
Papadopoulos. George Stephanopoulos. is
Oh boy,
George
George will
Stephanopoulos
be on GMA in the morning. He'll be there tomorrow.
George, I wasn't in jail.
'Cause Bobby got him in jail.
Papadopoulos.
Papadopoulos there. But
It's Adopolis, we know.
the point there though is, in following a little bit of this Roger Stone story, right? He also is cut from that mold of just being out there and being boisterous and making unsubstantiated comments and claims and just making stuff up. And it really felt like this was one where he made himself bigger than he really was, right? He did not have the deep relationship with Julian Assange, as he said, but he presented himself as being, I'm the conduit. And he got all these people to believe that, when I believe in real life, he didn't have much of a contact.
Right.
But the fact that he got himself caught up in so many lies, his lies of his lies is what got him in trouble.
Well,
it
they're
was
all
a-
con artists.
Yeah.
They
The
are.
whole
It was the
bunch of them.
arrogance and his desire for attention, remaining in the news cycle, being a subject of constant media coverage. He desired that. And remember, both him and Trump come from
They
the
had a bit of a falling out. They had a bit of a falling
No.
out until Trump got back in the limelight for it.
Absolutely.
And then Stone was trying to curry favor with him, right?
He was, but remember, they both come from the Roy Cohn
Roy
lineage,
Cohn, yes.
and so they
Right.
both follow that Roy Cohn game plan: attack. Stay prominent in the media, use the media, create spin. What's really fascinating, though, we know Trump is a compulsive liar, but what's really fascinating about this is two things. Roy Cohn, through Alex Jones of InfoWars, immediately pleaded with Trump to pardon him. Mm-hmm. Now, he immediately, this is Friday, soon after being convicted, through Alex Jones and InfoWars, he, asked the president for a pardon. Secondly, it's very interesting. Donald Trump, in his written statements to Mueller and doing an investigation, this is why they will never let him testify. And his lawyer said, "There's no way we'll let him sit before Mueller for a face-to-face questioning." So those answers were obviously written, and he had written responses. For someone who said, and this is a quote from Trump, he has the greatest memory of anyone in the world. Right. He has the greatest memory in history. Doing those written responses, he said that he could not recall the details of over 20 conversations he had with Roger Stone in the 6 months leading up to the election.
Right.
Now, he had over 20 conversations with Roger Stone and said in his written response to Mueller, he cannot remember the details of one of those conversations. We know that he was orchestrating, the leaks of, or being kept well abreast of the leaks of Hillary Clinton and the DNC's emails. We know that.
About his memory, right? Also, you just triggered something. So earlier this week, when he was questioned about Sunderland, do you remember having a phone conversation? He says, "I don't remember. I barely know the guy." He barely knows Sunderland, who gave $1 million and who is the ambassador to the EU, who he made part of the Three Amigos. But he barely.
But that's what he
knows him.
says about everybody. I mean, the guy is just really ridiculous. But you know who really is irking me? Rudy Giuliani. Because that is another snake.
Yes.
He's the one that needs to come before
All this Ukraine
committee.
stuff. Again, I don't know what dirt these countries have on these people. I don't know exactly what Rudy Giuliani's been doing in Ukraine for the past 10 years, but he was an integral part of this whole BS.
Yeah.
The tip of the iceberg, what we know.
Yeah.
And this goes back to, what one of the most evil men in the history of this world said, Adolf Hitler. And it is so true. If you tell a big enough lie enough times, people want to begin to believe it.
Exactly.
And Trump holds to that much. He believes that if he tells a lie enough times, but he only cares if his base believes it. He doesn't care if anyone else believes it,
because he knows they don't believe him. He knows that he knows that they've caught onto the BS.
Yes, but they are still supporting him for their own, ideological reasons.
Right. Well, one of the things here is we're going to turn this page and move on.
We could be talking about this all day.
I want to go into another story, but I believe in momentum. And one of the things I accept it because you have to respect people when they come out and say this. And I go back and I look at a former governor of Massachusetts, Deval Patrick. Now, let's talk about momentum. You're talking about the Boston Bombers there. Mm-hmm. The manhunt for them, and Deval Patrick led that.
I was in Boston at that time.
Wow.
He shut it down to get these guys.
Yeah.
I never forgot.
And my sister,
he did
as
an
Bobby knows,
excellent-
my sister was near the finish line
Yeah.
at the time of the bombing and called me crying and screaming. I remember it like it was yesterday.
Yeah.
There you go. And Deval Patrick, he stood up there. He showed leadership. And so when it came time to say who would run for president, when Trump and Hillary and all of them were out there, a lot of people threw out Deval Patrick's name. Deval Patrick came, former governor, and he came on Reverend Sharpton's show. We booked him on, and he came on, and he said that one of the reasons he did not want to run because he didn't want to put stress on his wife.
Yeah.
Family. Respect that. We totally respect that. Now, here we go. We have the candidates out there. We're out there for almost a year now. And now you want to throw your hat in the ring now. And I was trying to find out what was motivating until I saw another story after the Deval Patrick story where it was talking about where former President Barack Obama told the Democratic party's moderates to chill and the left to get more realistic, because there is some high anxiety there and jitters that the Democrats may not beat Trump.
Yes.
So now I'm starting to say, okay, now I'm connecting the dots. Why Deval Patrick is out there running, why Bloomberg is talking about running out here. I wish Deval Patrick would have got out there earlier. Your thoughts?
I mean, I think that Bloomberg, I was actually somewhat relieved when Bloomberg put his, said he's going to run, because I think that even though there are too many candidates on the Democratic side, I do think that what Elizabeth Warren is trying to scoop up Bernie voters, and by doing so, I agree with what Obama says, that you can move too far left in people's perceptions and it starts to turn people off. And I think that for Elizabeth Warren's base, who are very amenable to the whole anti-billionaire, anti-capitalist, attitude, that's fine. But there are a lot of moderates and older people who do not really care for that talk, and a lot of financial people who don't really care for that talk. And actually, my perspective is, for some reason, the easiest way to win is to find a boogeyman. Trump's boogeyman is people of color and others, and Elizabeth Warren's boogeyman is about money and class. And I'm just like, okay, race wars, class wars, like, is that? I mean, that's not what. There's more to America than that.
Can I just add in here real quick, and then you can continue?
Yeah.
A prominent Democratic official said, out of the 2020 Democratic presidential field, that 90 to 95% of their donors base is terrified about Elizabeth Warren if she wins the nomination.
Because
for the
she's
Democratic
trying to
Party.
create. She's taking us back to the 1% versus 99% argument, and she's doubling down on it. And like I said, there are values that can be drawn on that are more about like Americans being together, education, whatever. So I was kind of relieved, because I feel like Bloomberg has, despite some of his flaws, he's shown consistently over his career that he cares about a number of these different issues. And maybe Deval Patrick, seeing Bloomberg, was like, well, if he's in there, like, I'm going to get in there too. But no, bro, like, no one's interested. It's not interesting. Like, you should have been there from the beginning. Who cares about you right now? And what are you saying? And then also his Goldman Sachs affiliation. I think people were like, Goldman Sachs, we're not. Is it? Oh, Bain. Sorry, Bain. Bain Capital.
Bain Capital.
Yeah. There's a story in the New York Times today, because this is becoming interesting now. I know a couple of people here who they're supporting, but the whole thing surrounding Pete Buttigieg is still the whole thing with the African American voters, because it just came out today that he is surging. He surged, not surging. He surged to first place in Iowa in a new poll that came out today.
Yeah.
So this is saying that there's still some scrambling, that people are not comfortable with Biden, and they're not comfortable with Warren, and something is not resonating with Bernie right now. I just don't know what it is. It's not. I just don't see the same energy. And I know you. I believe you're supporting Bernie, right?
No, I haven't really determined. I mean, listen, I like Bernie a lot, but I haven't determined or decided. And then I'm a registered independent. Who I'm going to support as the candidate. I'm still waiting.
That's you're probably a example of independence.
I'm still waiting.
Yeah.
And let me just say this: President Obama, made those comments at the annual Democracy Alliance event.
Yes.
Which, ironically, is an event that is held to raise money for progressive causes and candidates. And so I think in this particular presidential cycle, I still think there's uncertainty as to how do you define who is progressive and who's liberal, who's too far left-leaning. And what's interesting is the Democratic Party right now is having this generational and ideological battle.
Absolutely.
And you don't see the Republicans having that. No matter what you want to say about the Republicans, no matter how critical we want to be, they are unified.
Remember I said that last time I said that.
They're unified. And if this battle continues, there may be a candidate who people say, hey, you know what? We don't really like this candidate. We don't really support this candidate. And just like we saw in 2016, you may not get out the electorate in enough numbers to defeat Trump, because this is about the electoral college. Hillary won the popular vote, we know that. But can you get the electorate out in the critical battleground states? And to go back to Buttigieg, I think he's done a great job in Iowa, you know, of putting a lot of resources and having a very strong ground game. I don't think he will ever resonate with the black community.
Yeah.
Well, can they join late? Can the black community join late?
I don't. Again, perhaps I don't think so. And again, I'm going to say this now. I think ultimately it will be Biden with Stacey Abrams as his running mate. I've said that many times. I do believe that, because you have Obama, and he didn't have to directly say it without mentioning Warren's name. Bobby has said this. You know,
Obama knows that Biden is having some issues.
He does know that. He does know that. But as Lola said, Duval Patrick, I don't think so.
I mean, it's like no one cares.
I do think Bloomberg can be the one candidate who could fill that space. But other than him, I don't see any other candidate coming in.
Well, let's talk about this.
Coming in
what
late.
About and see,
to be able to fill that space?
We throw this out there
point.
and it's talk, but Reverend Sharpton, we talked about it in depth last week and took it serious, because Hillary Clinton said never is not. She may jump in.
I mean, that is ridiculous.
And that's what I'm saying. But the bottom line, she won the popular vote.
But play this out, right?
I know.
What did we hear in the last presidential election? There were people who refused to vote for Clinton because they did not like her,
Right.
and so they either voted for the disaster we have now, or they sat out.
Yes.
And so to me, some of that sentiment is still playing out, right? People are scared of Bernie and Warren because they are so extreme, and they're attacking, as you said, the elite class out there. You then have the people who don't want another 4 years of Trump out there. And then you got every other Democrat in there. So human nature is people will vote for who they feel is safe. And safe, unfortunately, turns into those who are moderate. So what Obama's talking about is, you know, let's try to get more to the center. What Deval Patrick is doing, which is he's saying, you know what, that's probably the one lane I have. If I can come in and try to be this balance that right now doesn't exist, and I can get a little bit of shine off of my very good friend Obama, who's encouraged me in the past to do that. And I believe Bloomberg is in there, again, to go against Trump, billionaire to billionaire, but also to deter what Bernie and Elizabeth Warren is doing out there. And remember what we said on this show before, right? On the Republican side, again, I would not be surprised as this impeachment thing continues to unfold that you don't see Mitt Romney throw his name in there again, because for the same reason, right? He would be a safe representative for the Republicans, a safe conservative, not the lunacy they have.
And he's positioned himself well, because he's been an outspoken critic of Donald Trump.
Donald Trump.
And he has. And Bobby, you're absolutely right. And what President Obama is saying, whether you agree or disagree, is very plausible, and it is very smart analysis. He's telling people what he sees. He's also telling people what Bill Clinton saw when he told Hillary's campaign, listen, you guys need to get out there in those battleground states. These people are really feeling Trump. You know, those who feel, white voters who felt disaffected. And it was something that the Hillary Clinton campaign slept on. And so I think what Obama's saying is that you have a lot of moderates out there who certainly want progressive change, but they don't want it to come drastically.
Exactly.
You know, when you talk about taking people's right to choose their own doctors and healthcare, these are very personal issues. And while we all feel there's a need to overhaul the healthcare system, universal healthcare, if you want to do it in such a dramatic way and use the term radical, because that's what it'll be, radical change, and radical not in a pejorative, but it will be radical, drastic
There's this sort
change.
of swinging of the pendulum.
Absolutely.
From like, you know, it's like how
people,
much
and Bobby has said this many,
with?
many times in the show, people aren't really ready for that. And even people like, you know, us who we consider ourselves progressive, But at the same time, it has to be something that you have to do in a very measured manner.
And Larry's not here. And by the way, if people didn't know, Larry is in Mississippi taking care of some business out there, and he'll be back soon. So don't freak out about it. But what Larry has educated many of us on, because Larry is a pronounced Bernie Sanders supporter, and what he talked about was that Bernie's plan is to phase it in. The healthcare reform, right? He would not say just rip the Band-Aid off. He would make the eligibility for Medicaid, Medicare, every year just open up,
So like
just
a
go down there,
transition.
right?
Which is smart.
Which is different than Elizabeth Warren, which
definitely
is
different.
she's looking to just slash and burn.
Well, now she's talking about a transition phase.
Right. Well, again, as she's already demonstrated, and we joke about this before, right? In the music industry, it's called a cover. She's covering everything that Bernie.
Right,
that Bernie
yeah.
is saying.
Plans for
You know,
plans.
right. So-
Well, it goes back to what Fatine asked the question. Then why hasn't Bernie, who certainly energized the Democratic base and the young Democratic base
Yeah.
in 2016, why hasn't he really taken hold like that again? And I do think it's because of Warren, but I also think it's, again, how people articulate the message and how people view Bernie. And at the end of the day, likability is very important. And you have to ask, does Bernie have a high likability among a wide swath
Well, let's talk about this
of
poll.
Democratic voters?
Well, let's talk about this Iowa poll that came out, the CNN Mediacom poll. And let me give you the numbers. Pete Buttigieg is leading at 25%. He surged a plus 16. Elizabeth Warren is at 16%. She's down 6 points. Joe Biden is at 15%. He has went down 5%. Bernie Sanders, 15%. He went up 4%. Amy Klobuchar, she's at 6%. She went up 3%. The rest of the field, like Senator Cory Booker of New Jersey, Senator Kamala Harris of California, Tulsi Gabbard of Hawaii, Tom Steyer, Anthony Yang, and Michael Bloomberg, they're about 3%. 3% and 2%, and the rest of the field, whoever else is there, receives 1% or less. So right now, this is very interesting. Watch it. You know what Pete Buttigieg reminds me of slightly? He reminds me slightly. Is the whole thing about him being homosexual? Because if he wasn't homosexual, I think he would resonate with more black folks. And like Reverend Sharpton said, it is not like African Americans are not homosexual. You understand what I'm saying? So
Yeah.
they are, but I see some similarities of Pete Buttigieg and John Edwards. I just see a younger Democrat out there that he didn't handle the whole racial thing as mayor
in Cincinnati, right?
Yes, but at the end of the day, he's starting to look more like a candidate that people are listening to, and they can get behind.
A younger
Yes.
base.
I
Yeah.
mean,
You
I think
appealing
he's
to a
very
younger base.
smart, and I've actually liked him from the beginning because I just think he's very considered and he's very thoughtful. But I just find these numbers to be weird. Like, I really do. I'm like, I don't understand this.
Yeah.
So what happened?
Yeah. And you know what's interesting?
Like, what did he do in the past 2 months?
Exactly. You know what's
But
really
the same
interesting?
thing with Obama. With
For
Obama,
real, though.
before Iowa, he was 3%.
Well, I'll tell you, that's
was 3%.
that's a great question, and I'll tell you what he's done. In my view, something Obama said roughly 3 weeks ago at the Obama Foundation Summit in Chicago.
Right, I know.
He was speaking to those who characterize themselves as politically woke. And he said, those who are politically woke, you're on social media and you're being very judgmental and you're being very critical. He said, it is important that you understand you can be politically conscious and people need to be politically active. But he said, don't be rigid. And I think what Buttigieg has shown is, while he's certainly not blind, he's not rigid. Right. As you said, Lola, he's very measured, very thoughtful, very smart, clearly. He's a war veteran. He served in the military. And so I do think, the disadvantage is he's the mayor of a very small city, South Bend.
Yeah.
It is a city not far from Chicago. It is where Notre Dame is located, not far from Chicago. So it is a Midwest city. But I think that when you look at him, I think that he resonates with many of the voters because, as Bobby said, he's someone who brings a calm, measured approach. And he's an antithesis of a Donald Trump.
Yeah.
When we look at Bernie and Elizabeth Warren, very passionate, but Bobby used the word extreme. I think people look at them as being just extreme on the other end.
Yeah, they're similar
Trump
in
is
style.
very conservative extreme, while they may be very. So there is that space, for the moderates and those who are center left, and I think Buttigieg has really been able to capitalize on that.
He reminds me, actually, I know this is a weird thing to say, but in style, he reminds me of Obama, because he is, he's just not the very loud, kind of out there. And when Obama came through, I mean, I'm not saying he's as good as Obama, but he, people will be like, who is this guy? He's a bit of a wonk. He gets into the numbers. He's a bit, but he's really intelligent and he's strategic. And this is one thing I find about this whole Democrat thing. Democrats are not strategic. I don't understand. It's like they're in a bubble and they listen to that bubble and they don't look outside the bubble, and then they just do what they think the people in the bubble want. And it's like, you guys need to get some strategy for real. Like that's the one thing Obama knew how to do is strategy. Think ahead.
And I think
you have just echoed what Nitha Khan, our other panel member, says all the time about the Democrats out there, is that they don't have a good strategy. They rely on black people to carry them and don't deliver on that over and over again. So
let me just make this last point.
I just want to say this to the folks out there, and then make this point so we can turn this page. A lot of people have their opinions out there. Why don't you just send us, who do you think right now, if you had to vote for a Democratic candidate, just send it to us now. Who would you vote for? Send it to us now. Since a lot of people say, I think that Pete is full of it, this, that, and the other. Send us who do you think is the person that you would vote for today. You could change tomorrow, but today, who would you vote for? Go ahead.
No, I think Lola's absolutely right, and I think you have these disparate views within the party on which direction right now the party should take. Should they take this moderate approach, or should they take a more progressive and I think very radical approach?
That's the fight of the party.
And that's the fight of the party. And so therefore it is viewed as the party is not very strategic. And the leadership of the party, Obama was the clear, unquestioned leader of the Democratic Party for 8 years. He certainly established himself, very much so, well earned. And now, once he kind of moved out of the presidency, Hillary moved in, but she didn't really grab that space. No. And so now you ask yourself, well, who really is the leader of the party? Obama's still the leader of the party.
Also, though, because it seems to me there's a lack of principle. And what I mean is not that, yes, Elizabeth Warren has a long history of, fighting for the small man. So does Bernie. But, see, even hope and change is like a values-based thing. It was something that I think it's something that Obama deeply, deeply believes in. Even from a strategic perspective, I think he actually really believes in it. I don't really know exactly what these candidates really believe in. Okay, yes, from the policy perspective, but what's your philosophy? And see, on the Republican side, as much as I hate Trump and I hate everything he stands for, I actually do know what he believes in.
Absolutely.
I know he believes in some BS, but he believes in it.
Absolutely.
So here we go. Here we go. We got Duvall, we got Warren, we got Biden or Bloomberg, Bernie Sanders, another Bernie, another Biden, Sanders or Warren, Biden, but I reserve the right to change my mind. Sanders, got to get 45 out. So, so it seems like a lot of Bidens, and actually the one Bloomberg that's in there. So
it's interesting.
I know I'm a big Stacey Abrams supporter. Those of us that still know this, not as a. I do think she's a wild card. Yeah. I really do. I think she is so dynamic. I think she is so smart. I think her political future is so bright that, and we've already seen her on the national stage, but I think if we see her in a presidential race as a vice presidential candidate, if she is someone's running mate, particularly, again, that's why I think that if you're looking for that space, if it's not a Bloomberg, then people are going to say, hey, it's Biden. You put Abrams on that ticket, I think she's going to be able to elevate that ticket no matter who
Wow.
is going to be the nominee.
Well, the
So
VP
that's
better be
interesting.
exciting.
So she gets to the progressive. She gets to the young.
Yeah.
What about the moderates? Well,
Yes.
Biden would
Yeah,
handle
no,
that.
she's
Biden
very
would
good.
handle that.
She's very good with moderates.
She's very good with moderates.
So,
And she's into guns.
Yeah, that's a good
I mean,
point.
but no. What I mean is, she believes in gun control, but
Yes,
she'll
yes.
say, "I have guns." She
Right.
doesn't shy away
Yes.
from those issues, and she's moderate enough for people to like her, even if they're
Well,
sort of Republicans.
let's talk about guns since you just said that. Let's springboard into another topic. There
yes.
were 2 shootings out here this week. One made national news, and one barely made local news. It made local news. And I remember I think one of you brothers brought it up, but let's talk about the first one, the Santa Clarita shooting, where 6 were injured, 2 students died. The suspect turned the gun on himself, that's what they said, and he expired yesterday. Here we go again, another school shooting. What more do we continue to say? That we keep saying that something needs to be done, and this continues to happen. And then
there's no motive that right now have been, in the past ones, they've been able to go on their social media pages and find manifestos or some signs. And what's really troubling about this one is 16 years old on his birthday, he decided to take these actions and just randomly shoot at folks. And, again, the investigation will go on and hopefully we'll learn more about it. But there was no previous signals that he had a run-in with anybody or it just seemed incredibly random.
And there were guns, there were guns found in his home.
Yeah.
Clearly he was well schooled in the use of guns. Right. And the authorities believe that the gun he used was what's called a ghost gun. Ghost guns are guns that are assembled. So you can get various parts of the gun and you assemble them. And really what's most concerning and troubling is they're unserialized guns. So these guns have no serial numbers. And he apparently, when he began the shooting, the gun may be jammed, and he was able to unjam the gun. Right. And this all took place within 16 seconds. Remember, the entire shooting was only 16 seconds, which shows you how much damage could be done. Right. And so once again, it immediately raised the issue and the divide. Gun control versus other issues. And it is a combination of both. Right. We know mental health in this country is something that is underfunded. It's still not given enough attention by legislators. Nonetheless, it is guns.
Yeah, I want to say this.
It is guns.
There is a lot of reasons why people do things. There's hate. There's different motivations that motivate other people. There's just not one thing that motivates other people. But there's one thing that I took notice of, and I knew that when we grew up, a lot of us may have had cap guns, but when we played video games, we didn't have, our video games were not as violent as these video games. And I watched my nephew in South Carolina, and I just watched him as a child, and I would say, why do you play these violent video games? When you snatch a person out the car, you shoot them in the head, pow, pow, pow. You get in the car, you run up, or you run down people on the sidewalk, you run down the dog, the cat, and everything, and you destroy everything, blow up the building. And I said that this process over and over, and then access to guns, this is not a good combination. And then I watched my nephew, and I had a conversation with him because he has access for guns. And then he took his grandfather's gun. He got it back, at the end of the day. But the fascination with young folks look at things, sometimes when we talk about this, we look at it through our eyes. Some of these young folks, we need to have the conversation because they look at violence totally different. When it comes to the fascination of guns. Look at the increased shootings here in New York City now. Out in the borough of Queens, Erica Ford, head of Life Camp Inc. Yeah. She was going a couple of years, or at least a year, where there was hardly any major shootings out there. And now we have major shootings out there. We had the young brother, matter of fact, the young brother that got shot a couple of weeks ago, shot in the head in the basketball court.
From Cardozo High School.
Right. Now, guess what? His god sister was stabbed to death Friday. Friday night.
I believe that was in Jamaica.
It's right around, right to the corner of my daughter's elementary school.
Yes.
166 and 160th Avenue.
She was fatally
stabbed. So the violence out here amongst people, I'm not just throwing it on young folks, because I remember when a lot of times when the old folks were saying, oh, it was the hip-hop artist with the N-word. Yeah, but you go back to the black exploitation with the N-word too. So I'm not sitting here blaming young folks. I'm just saying that there's a different reality with some of the young folks, and we need to have a conversation with them to see what their mindset is on certain things. That's what we need to bring them into the conversation.
If they're not going to do anything about guns in terms of gun control, then that's what has to be done to some degree, because
now
the will to do anything isn't really there.
And I'm only going to speak to education in New York State, which I have some knowledge of. This is not. This should be part of the curriculums, classes, advisories to talk about. Give these young people space to talk about it, and make it a class. We're teaching them stuff that they're never going to use. 90% of the stuff we're teaching they're never going to use. We need to teach them social emotional development.
We
did, and I'm not going to get into the educational system because that will go on forever, but it's broken. And again, as parents, we have to talk to our kids, but they're spending much of their time around their peers in school. So, Fatin, you just made a great point about just video games. How does that impact? There need to be classes on that. Grand Theft Auto, when that game first came out, we were like, what the?
No,
this wasn't Pac-Man. I mean, we're like,
Pac-Man,
we're looking at this like,
8 little pellets.
Wait a minute. And so, Fatin, brother, you make a great point, and unfortunately, the powers that be are not hearing it, or it's not in their best interest.
And I'll tell you something else.
What about the shooting that happened in New Jersey?
With virtual reality coming, virtual reality games.
Yes.
That's a whole different level
Yeah, but let's talk about the 5 arrests in the New Jersey high school football game shooting that critically injured a 10-year-old. Any of your sports brothers want to take that?
Well, no, I was just. They got the guys, and this is something that happens, unfortunately, a lot around America. Friday night high school football games, and this was in
near Atlantic City,
Pleasantville. So it becomes this, the big thing in these smaller communities,
right?
And unfortunately, other beefs occur that have nothing to do with the game itself. It's just that there is a social gathering, because these were 30-year-old men.
They were all in their mid to late 20s.
Right.
Yeah,
and
all of them.
27, 28,
so they're
26.
not high school players. This was not, you pissed me off in class or you tripped me. So this is something in that environment where they unfortunately spilled over into this game on Friday night. And this happens in a lot of different towns and cities around America during this time, high school football, because it's a big gathering out there. But before we go in there, the quick question for Lola, right? So growing up in London, Southeast London, you have different gun controls over there. So what was it like when you come to America and you hear about these kind of shootings? What's the comparison? And like, why is it so different over there?
The thing is, we don't really have guns at all, really. Even the police don't carry guns. Only special police carry guns, like basically sort of military police or like special forces, but the average police officer does not carry a gun. But what we do have a lot of is knives and a lot of stabbings. And actually in the past 5 years, the rate of stabbings has gone up dramatically. So it's quite interesting, because you do find that, even the Video Game Association is like, they basically just do the same thing like with stabbing people. But coming here, there's a big thing in the UK, like, oh, Americans have guns and it's so weird. And I always like, yeah, it's super weird. But having spent 12 years, I'm like, okay, let me go and learn how to shoot. Seriously, I spent a lot of time in Massachusetts when I was with a former partner, and our neighbor had 4 guns. And he was a very angry guy, and he threatened to basically take us out. And we had to go to the police and say, that dude is not mentally stable, he has 4 guns, and you need to do something about it. And everyone on the street had guns. They were proud gun owners, and they had their, stickers on their cars. And that was the first time, like, wow, I'm living around people that, like, could kill me very easily and quickly. I've never had that experience before. But it did, and understanding as well, gun culture, people raise their kids to shoot. I mean, from birth almost. So living here, so you have to get your head around a different reality. And if I have to learn how to shoot a gun, I will. I would not want to have to carry one, but if I had to, given the reality of this country, I would.
I'm in the South. I shoot. I go when I'm in the South. But Pat Johnson says something that is very interesting, and she talks about the increase of gangs now in the streets. I mean, we've always had gangs, but now we have the increase of gangs. And as you just talked about the education system and after school, all these programs are falling by the wayside.
That's very similar in the UK too.
Young folks don't have anything else to do. And if the parents are working, who's going to stand up to these gangs? Because you got to realize that these gangs are terrorizing young folks. And who's going to stand up for the young folks that don't want to be part of gangs and being terrorized by these individuals? I tell you, this is. It seems like it's almost. It seems like, I know it's not, y'all. I'm not giving up hope, but sometimes it seems like it's a losing battle, and that's how some of our young folks feel.
And go back to something Bobby said before the comment. The beef that took place were between these 6 individuals, the intended target, and the 5 shooters. They were from Atlantic City, so this was some Atlantic City beef, and they brought the beef because the target was at the game, to the game, and you're shooting around young people who are in the stands on the field. So that is a very sick mindset. When you think about that, that is a sick mindset.
So I know we as we transition to the next one, you always gotta thank Edward Latson because he always brings some humor to it. So Edward says, I used to play Pac-Man, but I played Mortal Kombat, Contra, and Duck Hunt too. Anyone that laughs like the dog in that game is getting got.
Getting got. That's right. Now I just want to go on. Somebody, because we're winding down here, somebody said to me a couple of weeks ago, and somebody said, I'm not going to mention the name, the other night gave me a call. Well, brother, you need to put more emphasis on local issues, And I said, we talk about local issues on the on-air show. One thing about OpenLine, and while we're here at BLS, and before we came to BLS, one thing with the passing of Bob, and Tume not here, but with me holding on to this and with us having that legacy of Bob Slade, is that one thing that we did at OpenLine is that we touched the people in the local community, in the tri-state area, and we touched people around this country. That's one thing. That's why we were so successful wherever we went as a programmer. We wasn't here before, and now we are here on BLS. The reason why we are successful because that's something that we do. We have those relationships. We just don't limit it to the community activists and the politicians, the local politicians. We broaden that across the country. So somebody said, well, why talk about the whole thing with the Rodney Reed case? Because I wanted to spotlight that, because I remember where we did a case where there was a missing person. And then another show, a crime show, came behind us. And then Dateline came back and redid the show. And then the following week, the boyfriend admitted that he killed the girl and took the police to the body. So at times, we are in the #1 market. So people here are traveling through or traveling here to New York City. They hear these stories, they bring it back to other people, and they get involved. And with the Rodney Reed case, we had the brother on, Roderick Reed, on OpenLine 3 weeks ago. He came on here, he put out the appeal. Well, this past Friday, if you haven't heard, the Rodney Reed in Texas, through the national outcry, the Court of Criminal Appeals in Texas halted the execution of the prisoner, Rodney Reed, and ordered the court where he was originally tried to consider new evidence in the case, including testimony from eyewitnesses who have come forward in recent months pointing forward the victim's fiance as another
I hear
suspect.
there have been 8 new witnesses.
8 new witnesses
that have come through in
right
the past
now,
few days.
Now, the court's ruling came just hours after the Texas Board of Pardons and Paroles had also supported halting the execution and recommended the Governor Greg Abbott grant a 120-day reprieve for Mr. Reed. Now, yes, at the end of the day, somebody got on Kim Kardashian. I applaud anybody who gets involved for for doing the right thing. She got out there. She did what she felt was important. Other people got involved. You make a difference.
Kudos to Kim Kardashian,
Kudos to them, but kudos to our audience that got involved.
Absolutely.
But that's why we not only we talk about it, we get involved with those folks because you never know when it's going to be you or somebody or your loved one.
And this is for Bobby's favorite people, the trolls out there. See, we are, Fox says fan balance. No, we are fan balance. So we have to know, Brother Fatine, this was a bipartisan effort. There were many Republican lawmakers and legislators, both federal and state, in Texas, along with the Democrats, who call for more evidence to be brought forth, the stay of execution. And what is baffling to me, Lola and Bobby and Fatine, is that the murder weapon, which, again, may God, the soul of this woman, rest in peace.
Yeah.
Her belt was used as the murder weapon, and DNA testing has not yet been performed on the murder weapon.
And her fiance said that he's threatened.
To this day.
23 years later.
The belt, which was the murder weapon, DNA testing has not been performed on the belt.
No, but remember, the fiance was a police officer at the time.
In jail for 10 years.
In jail for 10 years. So I just want to just say that. And thankful for those. But I want to turn to the last story because it's a feel-good story, but there's still a lot of things that happened behind the scenes yesterday with the Colin Kaepernick. I was happy to hear this. A lot of people, I don't know if Jay-Z played a role. Some folks were critical about Jay-Z making a deal with the NFL, but sometimes you have to wait and see what people are doing because there's a lot of people that may get part of something that are not about selling out, but about making a difference. And they say, sometimes you have to be part of it to make a difference in it. You understand? The police department has some good brothers and sisters that try to get in there and make a difference. Colin Kaepernick yesterday, and I'll turn it over to the sports brothers to explain what happened yesterday.
Yeah, Jay.
No, you got it, brother. Break it down.
Well, listen, midweek last week, all of a sudden news came out that Colin Kaepernick, the NFL, was going to sponsor what they typically do, which is an open combine. So they have a workout facility. They invite all the teams to send representatives there. And they invite people to try out for teams. What was unusual about this was the short notice and the fact that they did it on a Saturday when most of the time when they do it, it's usually on a Tuesday. So what's the significance of a Tuesday? Well, as you know, teams usually, Tuesdays in most teams is their day off. So they play Sunday. They come in for film on Monday. Tuesday's a day of rest. And then Wednesday, they start planning for it. So Tuesday's the typical day. This didn't happen on a Tuesday. It happens on a Saturday. So what happens on Saturdays? Saturdays, teams are now, if they're traveling, are traveling towards the city that they're going to play in on Sunday. So the general managers, clearly the coaches aren't going to be there. So the more influential decision makers would not have been in Atlanta where this workout is. So that raised a lot of flags. It's like, well, wait a minute, what are they trying to do it? But the NFL continues to pronounce, we're trying to do this. And, so then they had 11 teams initially say that they were going to show up, and then the number grew to 25. But then the workout was supposed to begin at 3 p.m. in Atlanta. So yesterday at 2:30 Eastern time, Kaepernick's representative sent that out and says, we are not going to do the workout in the Atlanta Falcons home stadium. We're going to move the venue, the training facility. We're going to move the venue an hour away from here at a local high school because they had some stipulations that the NFL would not honor. One of them being that Kaepernick wanted the entire media to have free access so that they can videotape it to transparency. Now, the NFL claims that, well, we agreed that we would do the videoing and share the unedited video with Kaepernick as well as send the video out to the 32 teams. Kaepernick and his team did not trust the NFL. They felt as though, well, how do I know you're not going to edit certain parts of it, even though you gave me the original, but you can send an edit out to the different teams? So it just broke down. There is a standard liability claim, that a piece of paper that the NFL provides players, which is different than a standard liability that they have during the season. So there's a workout one, and then there's a tryout one, and then there's a workout one. This was a tryout one. Kaepernick saying, I've been in the league. I want the standard one for those of my statute. The NFL said, no, this is the one we're giving you out there. So it just broke down. So as a result, I think there were only 8 teams made it up to the facility to actually watch the workout last night. So there's a lot of, the NFL, as much money as they make, they continue to stumble and not do the basic things the correct way.
And let me just say, this is for people who say this is a sports topic. No, it is a social and cultural issue, because ultimately this is why Colin Kaepernick has been blackballed, because he took a stand against social justice, a movement that went global, and on the pitches in Europe, in England, you had the football, as it's called in Europe, soccer players taking one knee.
Yeah.
Started by Colin Kaepernick. This became a global movement. So this is not a sports story. This is a social and cultural story. The NFL wanted to control the environment and the narrative. I agree with what Colin Kaepernick and his agent Jeff Nally did. They said, no, we're not. No. We want media access. We want the media to be there. We don't want anyone to say, this is how he performed, this is how he looked. We want, as Fatin just said, full transparency.
That's correct.
They weren't going to get that under the structure of how the NFL set this up. Secondly, if teams were really interested in Colin Kaepernick, they would do the same with him as they do to most prospective free agents and players they want to sign. Bring him into your facility, have him work out there with your coaches, your GMs, your strength and conditioning staff, all those who are involved. The NFL is trying to provide cover for these teams. These teams don't have the courage and the fortitude and the moral conviction to bring this man in, give him a fair chance at a workout and a fair opportunity to be on one of their teams. We've said it. He is one of the best 64 quarterbacks in the world, meaning the 32 starters and the 32 backups.
That's right. And I saw the workout yesterday, and he looked good. I mean, he looks good for being out for 3 years.
The arm strength was there.
Yeah,
he's in great condition.
He can play, and he can do better than some of the players out there. I just want to respond to Anthony Long saying that Stephen A. Smith was critical of Colin Kaepernick, and that's why you got to listen to all radio at times, because Colin Kaepernick was visiting WBLS maybe about 3-4 weeks ago, and I don't know if he knew that Colin Kaepernick's girlfriend was right next door. So when Stephen A. Smith came out, she grabbed him and brought him in, and they had a one-on-one conversation on the air. And so, he was critical, but she got some things straight.
Well, he's been critical again because he sent something out last night where he just felt that Cap, should not have done it this way and everything. So, Stephen, listen, more power to the brother. He just signed a big contract and everything. Everybody
Stephen has been a friend
opinions.
of mine, so I'm not going to sit here,
This movie yesterday, it was a preview of a movie that comes out in December. It's called The Banker, and it's with Samuel L. Jackson and...
he's saying you're not hearing. Hold on.
Your mic went out.
My mic's out?
There you go.
Just use there, because this is going to be the last comment here anyway.
Yeah, it was basically it's a story. It comes out in December. Samuel L. Jackson, Anthony Mackie, Nia Long. It's really, really good. But it's
What's
about
the name of it again?
The Banker.
Yes,
it's about
The
these
Banker.
two guys, and it's a
Banker
true
brothers.
story. Two black guys who start buying banks around the country, and that's during Jim Crow and everything. And they buy one in Texas, and basically it's about the backlash that happens when people take stands, and this happens in every realm when it as relates to black people.
Absolutely.
Sports,
it's a true
music,
story too.
yes, true story.
Absolutely.
Entrepreneurship.
Yeah.
You take a stand, you say no, this isn't right. Be prepared for the backlash. Like all this stuff that they're doing with him, which is sad because he's an athlete and that's what should matter, is about setting an example to other people. You want to start doing the same thing?
Right.
Thank
Look
you.
what happened to your friend right here.
Thank
Let me
you.
put you back
And they
in your
fear
place.
the backlash.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So just to close out on Cap, right? I actually do believe he's going to get a job, right? And call me crazy, but I would not be surprised if he does not end up with the New England Patriots as a backup.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
I would not be surprised if he shows up in Baltimore as a backup to young Lamar Jackson, because they have very similar styles, and his former offensive coordinator coach,
Greg Roman,
is the offensive coordinator down in Baltimore. So so to Jamie's point about this, as bad as the NFL executed this, it does provide cover. It does allow a different narrative to start to shine. People can see that he's serious about it and he wants to come back. And I do believe some teams are going to say, you know what, they can now measure the backlash from this, right? Because there were a lot of local fans who showed up in support. There were like less than 10 that stood outside the Atlanta Falcons training facilities with signs. And there are pictures out there that just show the disparity between who supports him and who still opposes him, to the comments you made, Lola, about people just trying to keep other people down out there. So I do believe he's going to land up as a backup quarterback.
I know we got to close out. I just want to make this last comment. You have players who've abused women physically.
Yep.
Who have
Dogs.
again, have substance abuse issues, and I'm not being judgmental. What did this man do? What some of these players have done and have been given second and third and fourth chances are far more egregious.
Well, he went against the system.
He went against the system, and again, the cultural and social ramifications.
And I just say, Lola's just made a statement. I don't want to open up another can of worms. Yeah, what was my man name? That was he played for the Atlanta.
Michael Vick.
Michael Vick. He did do the dog thing, but his penalty was too harsh, and it was biased. And there's no ifs, ands, or if I would have been a white man, it wouldn't have happened like that. And that's all to it. The way it went down.
And was given another chance, came back to the NFL, and played very well.
Yeah, he did.
Yeah,
So
and by the way, MDNA72, yes, I know RG3 is the backup to Lamar Jackson. Colin Kaepernick is an upgrade to RG3.
Exactly.
Absolutely.
I want to first of all thank Lola for
Thank you.
participating on both
You
shows.
got a lot of
today.
fans out there,
Hold on. Give us that last name, brother. Let's
Lola Adeshoye.
Adeshoye.
Yes.
Yeah,
thank
baby. Yeah, baby. And Lola, just put it out here now that this is official invite back for the stream next week. I have a very big panel on the on-air show next week.
Okay.
But you're more than welcome to come back next
this
Sunday.
way.
We have the
I like it.
president.
This is
Yeah, we have the
fun.
presidential debates coming up this week. So there's a lot happening this week here. So I want to thank Will Downing for coming in early this morning. And we get a chance to go to his concert next week.
Yeah.
I want to, I did this last week on this show. It's something I made a point about, and it resonated. I don't know if you brothers got a chance to see it, is that I brought up a point where me and Bob Pickett had debated some years back about what literature is. And I've looked at literature is any form of a book or communication through words of reading. And I felt that I use the word street culture, where the brothers and sisters that were selling books on the street or in the black bookstores was literature. I supported those bookstores. I took my kids to black bookstores to buy books to support black businesses. And me and Bob got into it years ago that he said, like, the coldest winter and true to the game, that's not black literature. And I just said, come on, brother, that's not cool. Well, last week I brought in a book, and it's Scarface, and I don't have the authors. I know Freeway. Oh God, Freeway. I don't want to say Williams, but what is the rapper name?
Not Rick Ross.
Rick Ross.
The
Freeway,
brother from California
right, exactly.
Yeah.
He's one of the authors
Iran
of the
Contra.
book. Yes.
Yeah.
So, in his book Scarface, I came across a saying, and I week to week I use different sayings, but this is something that I'm going to continue to use as I have breath in my body to continue to close the shows that I'm on. And the saying goes like this: Remember, the greatest tragedy in life is not death, but rather living without purpose. Without a purpose, life has no meaning, no significance, no hope. It's activity without direction, events without a reason, just pointless. And most of all, life becomes motion without any true meaning. So live your life to the fullest, a life of purpose and meaning. That makes a difference. I tell people, Reverend Sharpton says, take a look in the mirror, and if you want to make a difference, it starts with you. A lot of people have sayings, but a lot of these sayings is looking at you and saying it starts with you and what you can do, and it starts by taking that first step. And when you take that first step and somebody else take a first step, that's how we get things done. Bobby, go ahead and close it out, my brother.
So as Bob Slade has always told us, get your mind right and keep a good thought. Thank you for tuning in this Sunday morning.
God bless.